I didn't want anybody to know. I didn't want to burden anybody with like worrying about me. So I kind of played it cool for a good couple decades.
And so what did that look like for you playing cool? Because I think a lot of times people don't understand that that's actually like a real coping strategy that
Yeah.
is very useful at the time, but ends up hindering people later on in adulthood.
Oh, 100%. Mine was like, I think about in school, my graduating class was pretty small compared to others. It was 100 kids. I I didn't belong. I don't want to say belong, but I wasn't associated within like specific cliques or groups. I was the person that was like friends with everybody.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Flip Your Mindset. I am your host, Stacey Urig, and today's guest is Julie Costa. Really excited to bring Julie on because Julie specializes in NLP and hypnotherapy, and we are going to actually do a couple of episodes with Julie. But Julie has a pretty unique story in her childhood. And if you know anything about me, I love to do storytelling, mainly because I think it's really important that people do not struggle in isolation. And I think we, as this generation and the generations below me, I'm 52, we were kind of taught like, don't burden people with your bullshit, don't air your dirty laundry, don't share what's going on in your life. But we are hardwired for connection as humans. So when we are encouraged to disconnect and struggle, we are creating so many challenges for ourselves. And in a time when there's so much anxiety, so much depression, so much disconnect, part of the goal of my podcast as a mental health resource is to allow people to come on and share a story of adversity. So someone that's listening might say, hey, that's somewhat similar to my story, or someone story that I care about, and they're in struggle too, or maybe you're in struggle. And it will just give you the sense that you're not alone on this journey. So we're going to spend, this episode really allowing Julie to lay the groundwork for how she got to where she is today. And then in our next episode together, we're going to talk about where she is today and how hypnosis worked for her and how it's become something that she does. And we're going to jam out on why subconscious work is so important. So welcome, Julie. How are you?
Hello. Thanks for having me. I was like,
Hi.
as you were just like saying all that, I was like, and I love the storytelling aspect because,
Yeah.
like you said, I don't think we hear about it enough, especially like people's struggles. Sometimes we just see the aftermath, and when they're more so what we deem quote unquote successful. So I love me a good story time.
I love me a good story time too. So let's kick it off. Paint us a picture.
Okay, we're gonna go way back. So way back, I am currently 44 years old. So we're gonna go back to when I was 10. So when I was 10 years old, this is kind of like where my whole story had started. I lost my mother unexpectedly in a car accident overnight. I am the oldest of three. So I have two younger siblings. I was 10, my sister was 8, and my brother was 5. And at the time, my parents were actually separated. And we were with my mom. She was out for the night with a friend. And so we had a babysitter. And what you were talking about before, that like connection piece, or we don't want to like burden people with specific things. So there's a part of my story I actually didn't tell my family for, I'm going to say, at least 25 years. Whereas that night, so it had happened just about, I think, like past the midnight time frame. The car accident where she had slipped on black ice. It was in January. We're in Massachusetts, so it was definitely winter time. And we were with the babysitter. We're all asleep, obviously. We were so young at the time. And the doorbell rang, or there was a knock on the door. And the way that our house was set up is the upstairs could overlook, like on one side, the kitchen, the family room, and then the other side was the front door. Well, I heard the doorbell, or I heard the knock. I don't remember which one it was anymore at this point. And I actually veered off the balcony and I saw the cops and I heard them tell the babysitter about what had happened. And I was so young. I was 10. So like it didn't make sense. And I kind of just like went back to bed. And then when I woke up in the morning, because what I would always do in the morning is I would cross the balcony over to my mom's room. I would like go snuggle in bed with her for a good 10, 15 minutes and then get ready for school. As I crossed the balcony, now overlooking on the other side, my whole entire family was in the kitchen, like my aunts, my uncles, my grandparents, my father. Um, and I obviously knew like something was up, and my siblings got up as well too. And that's when my dad and his sister, so my aunt, brought us into my room and they told us what had happened, that we had lost her. And that was like the start. And I like buried the memory of hearing it the night before. And it was like 25 years later where I finally started telling my family. Because I didn't want them to know that I knew. And I don't
And
know
why
why.
was that?
I know. It's a really great question. I don't know why. Um, like the first thing I think of is like I didn't want anybody to feel bad for me. That like I heard it without anybody around. And like that's just
Mhm.
like where my mind went when you talk about that, like not wanting to burden other people, or like air out anything. Um, and I'm not gonna like that was the first time in my family where we had experienced like such tragedy. Like absolute like rocked us to the core. Very tumultuous relationship with my mom's side of the family and my dad after. My mom's side of the family really disliked my dad. My dad really disliked them. My sister and I, not my brother, but my sister and I would go to my grandparents, my mom's parents on the weekends to keep that family bond. And then eventually I turned 15 and like me and my dad had a very rocky upbringing. And he ultimately kicked me out of the house at 15. So I went to go live with my mom's side of the family. But it was like
Mm.
through that time, I I'd done some therapy and counseling. It just like no one resonated with me. Like it didn't like it just I'm not going to say it didn't work, but it wasn't what I needed. And I didn't want this like outsider trying to have conversations with me. It just felt really awkward. And so I buried, I'm talking about like stepped way deep down. And I'm sure so many people can relate, like how I felt in my grief. And I didn't let anybody see it or like experience it. And I would like hide in my room and I had journals. I wrote and I wrote and I wrote, like listen to music, Aerosmith, to like they were like my best friends. I feel like they got me through
Yeah.
so much. They're my favorite band of all time. And I wrote. I listened to music and I wrote. And it got very dark for a while, like very, very, very dark. Um, but yeah, I didn't want anybody to know. I didn't want to burden anybody with like worrying about me. So I kind of played it cool for a good couple decades.
And so what did that like look like for you playing cool? Because I think a lot of times people don't understand that that's actually like a real coping strategy that
Yeah.
is very useful at the time, but ends up hindering people later on in adulthood.
Oh, 100%. Mine was like, I think about in school, my graduating class was pretty small compared to others. It was 100 kids. I I didn't belong. I don't want to say belong, but I wasn't associated within like specific cliques or groups. I was the person that was like friends with everybody because I
Mhm.
wanted to people please and I wanted everybody to like me. And I had this fear that like people would leave, that abandonment. That was my, core wound was abandonment because I lost my mom, I lost my dad. Um, and I remember I was like sharing my story with someone and it was like I felt like I didn't belong because I was the only person in my grade and even our entire school system, like me and my siblings, that had lost a parent. So it was
Right.
like nobody else could relate to us at all. So I played it so cool. I just like got along with everybody. I would let my emotions come out in my bedroom, and then I mean, I had to go through like all the experiences of growing up, like kind of by myself. Like even as like a woman, when you get your period when you're younger, like I hid that from family members until they finally like figured it out. But like I just didn't want to like put anything
I was going
on
to say, you just
anybody.
didn't really want to burden anybody.
No, no, like none. But then at the expense of, it was like I wanted that like nurture and connection like so badly, but I was very much actually closed off to even doing it.
Well, the thing is that we're hardwired for connection, right? And so
Mhm.
we do seek it, but then there's a part of us that's terrified of it because if we get too close, we could get hurt.
That's been my story. And so I would like seek that connection in boyfriends and in relationships. And then I don't know if this has happened to anybody else, but there would always be like some sort of like drama within those relationships. So it would almost like send that person away, but I would always want to see if they came back because then it meant they weren't leaving or they weren't abandoning me. That was very much a pattern for a very
Can
long
you
time.
just paint a picture of what that looked like just so the guest can understand it, or the not the guest, the listener?
Yeah, I mean, picking fights for like no specific reason at all. Like creating scenarios in which I knew there would be a larger conversation or there would be a fight, making things like a little bit extravagant. Like I actually remember having a fight with one of my boyfriends like in his car and we weren't on a very fast road. We were on like a back road in a suburban neighborhood. But I remember we were having a fight and I literally looked at like the stick shift and moved it from drive to park, like right then and there. So I was creating this like dramatic thing that just like didn't need to happen. So there was like fights, to see if they would leave, to see if they would come back, creating these
And do you think that was,
things.
I mean, look, obviously at the time that you were doing that, did you have any idea why you were doing that?
No, absolutely
But you
not.
felt this deep drive to do it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So
Mhm.
now, years later, given the work that you do, what do you think was driving that behavior?
Oh, I mean, it was definitely the way that I've always operated is I would rather say goodbye to you first and it's on my terms versus you leaving me and feeling abandoned.
But if you were to do that and the boyfriend were to be like, "You're batshit crazy, I'm out," then what?
And
Because
you'd
now
be
they are leaving.
abandoned. Exactly. Yeah.
So do you think it was just a self-fulfilling prophecy? Like you were
Yes.
creating the thing that you were the greatest fear of?
Oh, absolutely.
Let me
Absolutely.
ask you this. When that would happen, would you have like extreme heartache?
Extreme. Oh my goodness. In
Okay.
my teens, it was the end of the world, a relationship ending. Like I even remember my aunt making fun of me. It was the
Okay,
end of the world.
so just work with me here because sometimes I get these like aha moments. So it kind of feels like to me that you were creating an opportunity for you to have a reason to show and express extreme heartache because you hadn't processed and showed that extreme heartache when your mom died or when your
Mhm.
dad kicked you out.
Yep.
Is that fair to say?
Very fair.
Yeah. Do you
It's
guys see
wild.
how this shit works?
It's wild.
It's
Wild.
wild, but what a great picture to illustrate because I'm sure someone can resonate with that. And I think it's really important for people to understand. They'd be like, well, why am I sabotaging relationships because my mom died? Or when we
Mhm.
don't know how to process, your mind and your body will work in your favor to find a way to help you do whatever it is it needs you to do. And so
Yeah.
if you, I mean, this is look, I'm no expert on the cutting scene by any means. And there are plenty of therapists that are the go-to person for cutting. But studies show the reason why people cut is
Mhm.
often because they're looking for that release of
Yeah.
that emotion. And if they can't feel, sometimes people cannot feel emotions because they've really trained themselves to numb out and to shove it down or to really honestly disassociate completely, which for many people looks like they're lifting out of their body. And
Mhm.
then they can't feel. So sometimes they'll create scenarios, whether physical or emotional,
Yeah.
to help them feel something.
Mhm. And I, like, very much felt the breakups. Very much.
Right.
Yeah.
But do you think it was in alignment with really how you needed to be able to feel when your mom passed? And then, I mean, how were you able to express the pain of then being abandoned a second time by your dad?
Yeah, I mean, that was a great way because I mean, I was crying so much. The writing got my words down on paper. Like and the writing got like dark, like got the words on paper. The crying got some of the emotion out, but I wasn't necessarily addressing like the real root, you know?
Yeah. And it's interesting because you said you were in therapy
Mhm.
and you didn't really feel connected to it. And look, I'm a proponent of therapy, I'm a proponent of all mental health help. No shade to any mental health practitioner. But that's a very hard thing to get to the root of when you're talking at a very high level cognitive behavioral therapy level, because
Mhm.
those feelings and those emotions and those beliefs of I'm going to be abandoned is not at the conscious mind
No, and it's nothing I can like talk through
because it was a
with
feeling.
someone. Exactly. It's not something I could have talked through, and I mean, I was a child at the time, so people were picking the therapist for me,
Of
and it felt
course.
very much forced. Whereas now in adulthood, it's like I have that choice and I can build that rapport with someone and it can feel really good and really safe for me. That's why it didn't work well because it felt so forced. And yeah, we were
Yeah.
just like talking about things, but not like addressing anything.
So, okay. So you have these very significant, I'm going to use the word traumas growing up. And remember, guys, if you are a listener, you can all repeat the following sentence: trauma is never the event, trauma is the way that we interpret the experience. So, people would look at your mother dying in a car crash and no, that's very traumatic. People would look at any person getting kicked out of their home at 15 years old as being very traumatic. But if trauma is never the event, trauma is the way that the experience is interpreted, and it changes the lens through which we see ourselves, others, and the world around us. What was it that each one of those experiences created for you? What was the interpretation that you were walking with from each one of those experiences?
I mean, the beliefs I was walking around with for so long is like, I don't belong. That's literally been mine for so long. I don't belong. I'm misunderstood. Misunderstood because no one took the time, even family members, to like really understand how I was feeling. So being misunderstood's been a very big thing for me. And it's like rolled over into business. Like if I were to say something the wrong way in like a social media post or something like that, I'd be like, man, like I'm misunderstood. Those have honestly been the core beliefs running my show and like, I mean, abandonment wounds
Right.
to the
So if those
nine.
are the core beliefs that are running your show, right? I'm misunderstood and I'm not enough, and people I love are going to leave me.
Mhm.
Then how I'm really trying to illustrate this for people, how this all kind of connects. Then how did that cause you, above and beyond creating chaos in relationships, to prove all of it, right? Because we're always looking for that confirmation.
Yeah.
How did that continue to affect you into your late teens and into your 20s and into your early 30s?
Yeah, I mean, relationships was huge for me, friendships. I didn't, I should say. I didn't allow myself to get very close to anybody. I'd let you get close, but just close enough. I wouldn't let
Mm.
you get that close. So, like, close girlfriends, like, I'll look at my sister because my sister has some very close girlfriends and, like, other people I know, like, I never allowed myself that because I thought they were gonna, like, leave. I thought people would leave, and same with relationships. I
Mm.
would never truly like, yeah, from the outside looking in, Julie's in a relationship, but I wasn't really connecting with that person because, again, I would let you get just close enough, but not further than
And do
that.
you think the people you were in relationship with felt that and knew that that was happening?
To an extent, yes. Like, even my fiancé now, when I met him, he was like, "Whoa, like, your wall was up." Like, he could call it, like, from the get-go. He's like, "Your wall was up." He goes, "And it took, like, a while to break that wall
Yeah.
down." So I know
Yeah.
people felt that. Do they really know why or what was going on? Most likely most likely not unless it was talked about.
Did you know what was going on?
No. No.
Right. And I think that that's the point. Like, I don't
Nope.
think you're waking up and being like, "Well, install wall, put
No.
put steel around this today." Like, and
Yep.
that's what people need to understand. This is not a conscious decision. You now know this because you've done certain amount of work, but this is the subconscious running on autopilot. And it's important for people to understand, since we're going to be talking about the subconscious and hypnosis as a way of tapping into it, is that, I don't know what your belief is. You read all these different, stats. Some people say 90% of your day is run through the subconscious. Some people say 70% of the day is run. But ultimately, you've all seen the picture. All know the image of the iceberg where you see the tip of this iceberg. And then if you get the side view and you can see underwater, there is this incredibly massive structure underneath it that's 100,000 times bigger than the actual iceberg.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so think of that big, massive structure underneath the water as your subconscious. This is where your core beliefs lie. And this is where all of your feelings are generated based on the core beliefs. It's where all of your thoughts are generated based on the core beliefs. And so, therefore, that's where all of your habits and behaviors are generated. So,
Mhm.
very little of your day is happening at the conscious
It's
level.
insane. And if you even take my story, like, and you apply the iceberg photo, okay, so, like, that top of the iceberg, like, Julie's in a relationship, in her 20s, and, like, it looks all well and good, and she's saying, she wants to be in love, and she wants to have friendships and be connected. But what's running the show underneath at the bottom is I'm, like, arm's length out, if not double, triple that to keep that person actually, like, super far away and not super close. And then I am the type of person who've had a lot of friends, quote unquote, acquaintances, but not
Yeah.
a small group of very close friends because I don't want them to get that, like, close to me.
So fascinating.
Mhm,
You know,
and
it's
it's
so
because the
interesting.
subconscious was running that for me. Like, I didn't know that was what was happening.
Absolutely. So, what caused you to start to get curious about how things were being run in the Julie show?
It was definitely a couple of decades until I got there. So I had, since my dad had kicked me out when I was 15, we had rekindled our relationship before. It was still quite rocky, and every once in a while there'd be a little, like, blip of something would happen, and I was still in that space of feeling like I had to kinda, like, defend myself. Um, and I had worked on my mindset a lot, and mindset work became really important. However, it wasn't until I wanna say it was between, like, 38 and 40 years old. So we're talking my mom passed when I was 10. We're talking 38 to 40 years old now. That's a long time. I started out on my entrepreneurial journey. I got fired from a job I was at for 10 years. So, biggest ego blow. I actually just talked about this on social media today. Biggest ego blow because, again, it felt like someone was abandoning me,
Right.
and turned out to be the
And by
biggest
the way,
blessing.
that's the interpretation.
Exactly, because of
Right.
the meaning I attached to it so long ago.
Right. Right.
And so I started my entrepreneurial journey, and I just got burnt out, like, so bad because I was trying to do all the things and, like, please all the people and help all the people, and I got burnt out, and I was jumping from, like, all the coaches to all the courses, thinking I need to, like, learn all the things, and then I stumbled across this program that, mentioned hypnotherapy, it mentioned subconscious reprogramming, first introduction I've ever had with it, and, I was like, "I this just feels like I need to do it." I had also, I had been in, like, a pretty bad state, just, like, high anxiety, and, yeah, I wasn't in a good place, and I was like, "There's something about this program." And so I signed up for it, and, it happened to be a certification program, which I didn't know at the time, and, through that, I think it was, like, 6 between 6 and 8 months long, I started getting introduced to hypnotherapy, so conscious reprogramming. We were practicing the modalities on ourselves, and obviously you do so with an ecology, so things we needed to work on. And I started seeing, but then like really feeling the shifts myself. And I was like,
Mm.
wow. And it was probably the first time I felt a shift in the way that I experienced and felt towards grief and my mom.
Mm.
And then I kept going like more and more and more and more. And it's been like my response to the situation is different. My response to my relationship with my dad is different. It's it like really moved the needle forward for me.
Guess what? This is the perfect place to end this episode. Because we're going to pick up right what that needle was telling you. So, guys, Julie's done a great job of illustrating for us not just her life experience, but all of how it impacted her, all the different ways that she was showing up at school, in relationships, for herself. And, you know, I think it's fair to say anybody that would hear your story would say, wow, that's pretty fucking traumatic. Like, that was a really challenging set of adverse experiences. And I'm really happy that you were able to give very good examples and paint a picture for people on all the different ways that that can show up.
Yeah.
Right? Like how we're sabotaging relationships because of a fear of abandonment because my mom died. Like that puzzle and those dot connections make so much sense to me. But this is what I'm trying to get people to see, that the experiences that we have early on in childhood impact us in so many different ways you can't comprehend. So if you like this episode, you're going to want to be on the lookout for episode number 2 with Julie, because what we're going to be talking about is exactly where we're just leading into now is why does working at the subconscious level matter? Why are hypnosis and things like neuro-linguistic programming, which is her method, powerful? How can that impact somebody even with the experience that you had? Because again, we can't change the circumstance. We can't change the fact that your mom died in a car crash. We can't change the fact that you ended up having a rupture with your dad and had to move out of the house at 15 years old. We can't change the event, but we can change the interpretation. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. I'm excited to continue the conversation.
I'm excited to continue it too. So guys, if you're curious, you're going to want to look for the show notes for when episode 2 is dropped. And until then, take care.